GOIL. GOIL, they say good energy. GOIL, Genara, Gendia. It's the 17th of July today, exactly 17 days into the month of July and 14 days to the end of the same month. We always say that if you have an endeavor which you want to start, if you have a business agenda, if you have anything at all that you want to start, even if it's just something to do for charity, if you have not started yet, we always say that by all means, it's never too late to start. Our prayer, as has always been here on the show, is that God bless our homeland, Ghana, and definitely make our nation great and strong. This program airs every Wednesday, right from 1:15 p.m. through to 2 p.m. here on your Superstation Joy 99.7. My name is Yabanafu, and I am your host for the show. In the last couple of weeks, we've been spending some time here in the studio talking about something that's very interesting to productivity for us as a nation and in our businesses. And this discussion has continued right from us being on air to times when we've been off air, and it's been very explosive. We've been talking about sexual harassment in the workplace and its effect on productivity. How does it affect work? How does it affect productivity? If I was able to provide 100 units of whatever I'm working on, how does sexual harassment cause me to produce less or more or otherwise? This has been an exciting discussion. We've been spending time in the studio with Senyo Ajabing, who is a labor consultant and also an HR specialist, and he's been helping us dissect that discussion. Last week, we looked at a number of areas. We looked at the types of sexual harassment. We looked at the concept of productivity. We also tried to look at the cultural, societal, and corporate context of sexual harassment. And then I think we're able to talk about where, when, and how it happens. Today, we want to be able to continue that discussion and talk about who the perpetrators of sexual harassment are. Opinion is divided when we talk about sexual harassment and how what constitutes sexual harassment and what does not constitute sexual harassment. Last week, when we opened the phone lines, we also had some very interesting views on who the victims are. And I'd like to say again before we start in the show that our discussion here on sexual harassment is not skewed towards one particular gender. We're looking at it holistically. We're looking at sexual harassment in its broad context. And so we're looking at men harassing women, we're looking at women harassing women, we're looking at men harassing men, and then women harassing women. So across the spectrum, harassment, wherever it happens, however it happens, is not acceptable. And that's a discussion that we're having. The discussion is getting more and more exciting. So we have again been joined today. I have a dual panel, if you like. I have two resource persons here in the studio. One, Mr. Senyo Ajabing, I've already introduced. Senyo, you're welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And I also have with me here Human Resource Manager for CalBank, Mr. Kwame Boafo. Kwame has been with us sometime, I think, early this year on the show. Or was it last year, Kwame? It was last year. So you're welcome to the show, Mr. Boafo.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've been arguing off air just before we came on, and today I want us to go straight into it. So I'll allow you guys to go on for about 5 minutes each, and then we'll open the phone lines, and then we'll start the discussion, because I know that there's a lot of things that we want to talk about. We're giving examples off air. I don't want to let the secret out of the bag yet, but we're going to focus today on perpetrators of sexual harassment, who the victims are, the effects on the victims, lawful duty of an employer regarding sexual harassment, and grievance and complaint handling in sexual harassment. Those are the areas we're going to look at. So maybe we'll start with Senyo. You've been here, isn't it? And Mr. Boafo, do you want to take a first bite?
Oh, well.
Yeah, so for just 5 minutes, talk to us about any of these areas, and then Senyo will take over, and then we open the phone lines.
Okay, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. We talk about perpetrators of sexual harassment at the workplace, and just as you indicated in the intro, this should not be construed as a boss subordinate only related issue. This is something that cuts across, so technically at the workplace, everybody or anybody can become a victim of sexual harassment. But predominantly we look at bosses or people that we see as bosses are being, most likely one of the source for sexual harassment. We're also looking at other supervisors, people who have responsibility for other people, or people who have influence or power over people at the workplace, also being a source of sexual harassment. You talk about your colleagues can also equally be responsible for sexual harassment. And in the discussions that we had gone by in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think that has also come in. Of course, HR people don't escape the the line of fire when it comes to sexual harassment. So HR people are And then, of course, there are also vocations, or there are specific organizations where people or workers in those environments are most likely either to commit it or also be at the receiving end of sexual harassment. And I'm sure that the conversation goes on. We can talk about it. Interestingly, we also have clients also becoming, perpetrators of sexual harassment. And in our offices, or banking halls, for example, you tend to hear that a lot, that people technically come to banking halls or come to our offices just so for the opportunity to, make one or two moves, and sometimes it gets a bit below the belt. So basically, anyone can be a perpetrator, anyone can be a victim, but in the broad consensus, that is the areas that we want to focus on. Maybe Senor will want to add one or two things.
Senor, just before you come in, last week we were talking about this, where, when, and how it occurs, and it just brought my attention to something. We're talking about sexual harassment happening in the workplace.
Yes.
And I think that for purposes of clarity, we should not send the message across that the workplace is only the office, because we're looking at productivity, we're looking at work. So generally, anything that generates an income or generates some form of revenue can be looked at as work for the purpose of this discussion. So for me, who works in, let's say, a hospital, where is my workplace?
It's the clinic.
And if I'm
or the bus.
If I'm a tractor driver, where's my workplace?
It's the bus.
No, so the point I'm making is that the workplace is any and everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where work takes
Where
place.
work takes
yeah.
place. That is
Economic
the
activity.
workplace. Yes.
Precisely. And even for the domestic staff at home, for example, who
The
help,
home is their workplace.
In fact,
the home is their workplace.
Yeah.
it's one of the sources that identified as being most prone to sexual harassment.
Yes.
The domestic workers are one of the most vulnerable groups when it comes to sexual harassment, because most of the time they find themselves at home. Their office is at home. And if they are left alone, either the children of their adopted parents or even their parents themselves also become perpetrators of harassment when it comes to that office.
Right.
And so the domestic workers also don't escape that. You also talk about people who are engaged in massage therapy and all that. Their parlor is also their office. So
Yeah, but it leads me to another question. I mean,
Yes.
I'm going to be extremely controversial on the show today.
Go
I'm going to
ahead.
speak for those who are thinking and want to ask questions but may not be able to call. Do you think that for those who are called perpetrators, which is those who commit the act, they don't set out to commit it all the time? Of course, sometimes it happens accidentally, it happens however. But if by virtue of the work I do, I'm thrust in an environment that makes me prone to, I won't say sexual harassment, but that makes me prone to
Harassment. Just say it.
harassment,
Yes.
or let's say relationship with, if I'm gay, I'm around a lot of sweaty guys all the time, I'm gonna get aroused at some point.
Yes.
So, for example, massages.
Yes.
You're touching me. I mean, I've said this thing oftentimes. I don't want to be in certain environments because it will cause certain reactions. And we had this argument vehemently at work where, we're talking about the fact that is that reflex or a reflex action? I don't know how to put this well. While I'm being harassed or in the process of harassment, does a reflex action constitute acceptance?
No. See, we have defined what it is. Let me give you an example. In another vein, look, you like cake, and then you work in a bakery, and there's always cake. Does that mean it makes it right for you to keep taking the cake and eating without authorization? That is what it is. So this your reflex you
my
talk
sickness
about.
is that I can't control myself.
Good.
So if you know
So
this
you
and
get
bring
help.
the cake to me
So-
where I am, then you are harassing me.
Yeah, you see, it is unlawful to the point where the person starts saying, I am not comfortable with what you are doing. So it moves beyond two consensual adults agreeing to do something to an area where it becomes unlawful.
If you are massaging
and
me, Senor, I
yes.
don't mean to cut you, but if you are massaging me, I'm sure that all the professional masseuses who are listening will corroborate this.
I am one.
You are a masseuse.
Yes.
So there's a professional way to massage.
Yes.
But there's no professional way to wait, hold on. There's no professional way to tell how my feelings will react to your touch.
Exactly.
Maybe my feelings, as people put it in quote, are in my neck.
Yes. So yeah,
Okay?
at the
And you're
point,
massaging me, and you keep touching my neck, and you keep touching my neck, and touching my neck.
and you say, "Don't touch me there,"
Mm-hmm.
the professional
Yes,
masseuse will move away from that spot. In fact, the professional masseuse is not supposed to touch erotic areas
Yes.
of the body.
Which one is erotic? I say my neck. You say erotic.
Okay.
Well, let's not argue. I'm just saying
Mm-hmm.
that the point where, and you talked about massage, the point where the client starts saying, "I'm not comfortable being touched here," is the point where you stop as a professional. So there's a line. You identify the line and you do not cross it. You see, and that is why we have victims.
Right. Let's talk about victims and its effect on victims and organizations.
Okay.
Sam, we'll come back to you
Sure.
and we'll talk about the lawful duty of an employer. Yeah.
So subordinates mostly will be victims. Anyone who is subordinate to
Does that mean
a
bosses cannot be victims?
bosses can be victims, but it's rare. It's rare up the chain, but down the chain is very common. So the victims, subordinates, male or female, it does not matter, because we know, and there are cases where female bosses have sexually harassed their male subordinates. Then secretaries and PAs, personal assistants, who work very closely with their bosses, also sometimes become victims of this. Customer service people would normally become sometimes victims of sexual harassment. Female cleaners in the workplaces, where they come early and they come and clean, or they clean late before, sometimes they become victims of sexual harassment. In the hospitality industry, room attendants and housekeeping staff is very, very, very common among them. Then we have waiters in pubs, bars, and restaurants. They also are, because when people take alcohol and they are feeling a bit good, sometimes their reactions to their environment is a bit, free. So the waiters then become the victims of that. Then we also have female workers in very male-dominated environments, like construction, mining, engineering environments. You have a lot of males and very few females. The females sometimes would become prone to being sexually harassed. And then some female supervisors and CEOs also become targets for sexual harassment, especially where they have very adventurous younger male or female subordinates. Okay, so these are generally the victims.
Right.
But let's talk about the effect of sexual harassment on the workplace, because this show has basically been about the issue of productivity.
That's
And
correct.
I'm very passionate about productivity, because that is where we drive the revenue. And so if we have issues with productivity in the workplace, it means that we cannot push profits the way we want to push it. And especially in the world today, in Ghana today, it's hard for everybody. So these things sometimes deprive organizations from reaching the profit margins or hitting the profit margins they want to. So for the organization, you have reduced productivity because the environment is not conducive for people to be able to work freely. So you don't get the best out of them. They are jittery, they are afraid, and so they don't give up their best. Again, legal costs. Where you have created that environment and an employee has been sexually harassed and you get sued, you lose money. Then you have employee turnover. That kind of environment where people are prone to harassment does not lend to retaining workers in the workplace. So they tend to leave all the time. So sometimes where you find people not staying too long in organizations and the turnover is very high, you want to investigate to see why they are leaving. Sometimes you may have one or two people in there who may be perpetrators of
Or terrorizing
harassment,
the others.
terrorizing the others.
Okay.
Then we have increased workplace disputes, and then absences. People would give all sorts of excuses to be absent because they don't want to be seen, or they won't come to the workplace to become victims of harassment. And then increased hospital visits. People will give excuses to go to the hospital, or generally it will affect their health. And so you see that your hospital cost starts going up. And all these may be effects indirectly effects of sexual harassment.
Okay, Mr. Waffle, you want to add to that?
Yes, on the victim side again, because it's two-way. On the organization, is the effect on the victims that have the direct effect on the organization. So if you talk about the individual, victims, they go through a lot of psychological issues. They will face anxiety, they will go to stress. Some people may go into depression. Some will lose weight because they are unable to deal with the emotional or psychological aspect of the trauma that they are going through. And in cases where people actually had the incident happen, they get into what is called the post-stress traumatic disorder, which virtually requires an extensive therapy to deal with the individual. Now, on the part of the individual also, there are also financial effects, because if as a period I'm unable to come to work, most organizations have absence management policy. So if for a certain number of period you're unable to work, your salaries are going to be reduced. And if wherever you're working, it's also that your wages are tied to the physical products that you deliver, it means that it's also going to affect you in that way. So for the victim, it also will have a financial impact on you. You also talk about the social effects. Sometimes the stigmatization that people go through for just bringing the issue up, the mere fact that you are seen as having either trumped that charge up in order to embarrass somebody, or you being weak because these things is normal, and so these things also tend to invariably, and sometimes it leads to a low self-esteem on the employee, that even after the issue is addressed, people still don't get that confidence to carry on with their work. And the other aspect that I want to talk about is the survivor effect. The other colleagues who are in the workplace also begin to look at vicariously what has happened to their colleagues and see management response or reaction to these incidents, and then also tends to learn, from them, and it also affects them one way or the other. So more like who say what body now, so with the literally, so just being careful in order not to get yourself into trouble, or knowing how you'll be treated if you are also
to start engaging in preventive behavior.
Exactly. So
So before you talk about grievances, very quickly, let me ask, and I know we talked about types of sexual harassment earlier on, in the show. If it's not necessarily about the act alone or the process, but if I asked you for a sexual favor and you refused to do it, and so I start picking on you, I'm harassing you.
Yes.
Does that fall under sexual harassment? So, for example, if I say, you start keeping late hours, bring me this report. I don't like it. Go and do it again. If you don't finish, you're not going home. Come early.
We classified it as hostile environment. Remember?
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And if because of that, then assuming the person is terminated or something, then becomes retaliation. Right. So it is harassment. It is harassment.
Okay. I've got a comment here. Usually I won't take comments at this point, but I can't resist this one. This one says, it's from Emilia. Emilia has a lot of comments. Emilia says, how about the boss who always passes sexual comments to the point of asking, how many times did you do it this night? To put it mildly. Even during meetings. Another one is, hey, is your husband enjoying all this behind alone? Okay, so very quickly, Sam, do you want to react to that?
Well, that is a blatant example of sexual harassment. In any case, as you read the thought, the sender is implying that she is uncomfortable with that kind of line, and it meets all the criteria for sexual harassment. It is persistent, the person does not want it, and it is repulsive, and clearly it meets all the grounds for sexual harassment.
Senor, very briefly.
Yes. This is a very typical example of sexual harassment. And you find Emilia saying, how can an employee take it up? Okay, so like I said, we make very loose comments as if it's jovial, but at the end of the day, the impact is sexual harassment, and we need to be careful.
Let me be
about
controversial. I'm going to open the phone line shortly. We did, and I know it's a going discussion. So, but we did explain at the beginning of this discussion what sexual harassment was, and we're clear and emphatic that it becomes harassment beyond the point where the person says, "I do not like what you are doing,"
Yes.
or expresses it in any other way. Stop. If I make a statement and say, and please, when I make these statements, it does not represent my personal persuasions on this matter. If I say, how many times did you do it tonight? And you say, boss, I don't like that. I've stopped. But have I harassed you?
You see, because of the environment.
When you say I should stop, I stopped.
No.
But I have harassed you regardless.
Yes.
Because I said it in the meeting.
Yes. So that may be a one time. But if it happens again, or like Emilia is saying, it happens in meetings where everyone is there, then it is dangerous.
What if I
And has
say
to.
the next time I don't mention your name? I say some people did it 50 times.
Hostile
I've
environment.
not mentioned your name.
Hostile
Why
environment.
are you assigning it to yourself?
Yeah.
Hostile
But the
environment.
point is also that, you see, there are other colleagues. Okay, what is their assessment on that type of comment? Okay, if the previous instance that it happened, they were also in the presence, even though you may not have specifically mentioned anybody by name, they could easily infer who that comment was directed.
If the cap fits.
Well, that is what the environment that then you are creating is.
Remember
such
that we even said that posting images
Right.
and pictures
On
and
platforms,
drawings,
yeah.
and you mentioned
Washrooms.
the washroom, right? And a name is not attached, but everybody can see that it's
We
directed
say,
at a particular
Amma
person.
is very loose.
So you find that is harassment, whether you mention names or not. Once anybody can point or pinpoint who it is directed at, either directly or indirectly, you are guilty of
Yeah, but
sexual
you see,
harassment.
Yeah, let me add this quickly. And again, if it is general towards a particular sect, don't forget also that the group of females who feel so harassed can collectively cite you for harassment. If
Yes.
it is directed at women in general in that office, they can collectively say you are harassing
Yeah, but
us.
Sam, you see, my worry, and you guys, I'll let you react to this after we go for the break. But my worry is that gradually I see this whole. It's not a bad thing. No one should have the right to harass anyone else. No one should impinge on anybody's right. But gradually, this whole thing about harassment in whichever form is beginning to reduce to the point where it's about how the person on the receiving end feels about it, how they interpret it, how they think it's affecting them. How can my whole destiny be reduced to how you feel about what I said? You will react to that. Time check in the studio, 40 minutes past the hour of 1. I want to open the phone line straight away, but we will be doing that. We'll be doing that shortly right after this.
The masterclass is in session, and you can interact with us via Facebook at Joy Business or at Joy 99.7 FM. And if you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM. Don't forget to hashtag masterclass. You can also send us a text on 1422 across all networks, or join the WhatsApp conversation on 0244 340437, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass right here on your superstation Joy 99.7. Goyle's new Sympathetic 5W20 and 5W30 lubes are the best engine oils for your vehicle. They are specially engineered engine oils which work efficiently on all modern petrol and diesel engines. They clean, they protect, they reduce fuel consumption, and they prolong oil life change intervals. And they also enhance your vehicle performance right from when you start up till when you switch off. Go to any Goyle filling station and grab the new Goyle Super Synthetic 5W20 and 5W30 engine oils today for superior vehicle performance. Goyle, they say good energy. Goyle, Yenara, Yendia. So I'm going to reopen the phone lines. Numbers to call 0302 216 541. That's 0302 216 541. Pick up the phone, give us a call. We're talking about sexual harassment at the workplace and its effect on productivity. I've got a caller on the line. Let's take that call first, and then we'll come back to my guest in the studio. Good afternoon. You're welcome to Masterclass. I think this is Stephen, right?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Stephen. Talk to me.
Yes. I think persons with all sorts of deviant sexual behavior, unprincipled sexual appetite, they have no boundaries as to where they can go and what not to go.
Yeah.
They see a pure water salad they are chasing. They see anything is scared they are
Anything
chasing.
is scared.
Look, if you were see CEO and you don't respect yourself that you ask those senseless questions as to who had sex last night and all that. Really?
Maybe he wants to.
Is that part of work?
No, but maybe he wants to lose tension. Let people relax a bit before the meeting.
No, you see, leadership is so serious that leaders don't discuss some issues.
But is sex not part of life?
No,
why are we pretending that it's something that nobody wants to touch? Everybody's thinking about it.
But you see, there are some jokes you crack, and there are some jokes that when you crack, you lose self-respect.
It's true.
If you know your self-worth as a CEO of a company or manager of a company, you don't
talk about sex in the boardroom. Stephen, thank you so much. That was Stephen expressing his concern there. There's a place for everything. That's the point he's making. I've got another caller on the line. I've got Titi from Medina. Good afternoon, Titi. You're welcome to Masterclass.
Thanks. Good afternoon.
Talk to me, Titi.
For me, first of all, it's the position you seem to be taking, much as you want to be the devil's advocate.
It's not personal. I'm representing those who cannot ask the questions.
I understand, but I just feel like you want to give it a bit of seriousness.
Okay, talk to me.
A bigger challenge that is, it pervades, our workplaces, and I feel we must see it as a serious issue that needs the urgent attention as possible. A lot of our sisters are going through a lot of these challenges, and the avenues for reporting them are often limited because of economic challenges and people's threats to livelihoods if they reveal those situations. I think more and more we are seeing a lot of the corporates, the bigger multinational corporations, putting in place at their offices clear signs, clear procedures for reporting some of these. Yeah. And I think we should make it, especially the state institutions, governments should make it a policy. Yeah. Every state institution should have a clear guideline on reporting issues of harassment at the workplace, including those who do not want their names disclosed, to do it in a way that they can still report it without feeling that their jobs will be at stake. This is what I want to add to the discussion.
Right. Stephen, thank you so much for your contribution. Please keep this. I've got Abba on the line from Tema. Let's talk to Abba. Good afternoon, Abba. You're welcome to Masterclass. I'm sorry for keeping you.
That's all right. Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Abba. Talk to me.
Yes, the discussion is very interesting. I was following it last week.
Right.
This week. Yes, and I feel that you have left out a very important area.
Talk to me, Abba. Tell us about it. Schools. Right.
Classroom. Please, touch that one.
We will.
Because, this leads to children even abandoning school. Yeah. I am a teacher, and I had my own class, a boy in the secondary school, harassing me.
That's interesting.
Yes. Harassing. I was shocked. I reported to the headmaster. They called him. They gave it to him at meetings and so on. He was asked to go and write letter of apology. And the letter of apology was such that I couldn't even show it to anybody. I said, well, he had written the letter of apology and had accepted it. So it is a very teachers and students.
Wow. Okay, Abba, please stay on the line. My producer will have a chat with you, but thank you so much for calling on the show. Yes.
All right.
That's interesting. I remember you mentioned about a junior, a female boss being harassed by a junior. So that also happens, doesn't it?
It does.
That's interesting. Okay, let's go back to Emilia. Emilia says, who do you report to and where can employees take it up? It's important to have this addressed. So, systems of redress.
So, the first thing is that the organization and the employer at law is duty bound to create a safe environment for every worker. And therefore, systems must be put in place to ensure that people do not get sexually harassed. Apart from that, there must be a clear policy that is created, is designed, developed, and then it is taught to the workers. Every worker must undergo an awareness program as well as orientation on sexual harassment so that they cannot say they do not know. And this is a duty of the employer. The employer needs to act promptly on complaints of sexual harassment If they don't, they become complicit.
Right.
And then the employer needs to take strong action against offenders when it is proven that somebody has been a perpetrator of.
Sam, I'll come to you
sexual
shortly, and maybe we'll talk about what Abbas said on talking about the possibility of these things. It's not the possibility, but the fact that it's happening in schools. So I think that's an area that we didn't touch on. But I've got Ike from the US. Ike says, can uncomfortable eye contact cause sexual harassment, and can an observer who's a third party, not involved, also be harassed in the process?
Well, it describes it more like a casual contact, if you like, for the first time. And as you've said it, then the basic thing to do is to register the protest that you do not like that kind of eye contact. And if it becomes repeated, then it may be grounds for filing a complaint of harassment. The third party side, I fail to get it because the recipient is the one who makes the call as to whether he or she is being harassed or not. And so if that eye contact is not directed at the third person, his or her standing in that categorization becomes, a little contentious.
Right.
And
yes.
But do you know, Yao and Sam, that, for example, like I shared an example that where a colleague is always viewing pornographic videos, it becomes harassment to
other people. Right, of course.
Right. So if that eye contact, okay, I mean, I just want to extend it beyond what Sam has said, that if that eye contact continues, and assuming it is a friend, all right, who has a relationship, not a sexual relationship, but a friendship with the person who is being harassed, the third party
can also be harassed.
Can also become harassed by virtue of the relation that he has with that. And also that kind of activity can create the environment where people get harassed. Maybe, for example, two people's love affair in the workplace, in the face of everybody, can become sexual harassment to third parties who are in that environment. Yes.
That's an interesting perspective. So it's not just about the two people involved, but it could also affect third parties.
Yes.
Okay. I've got Ken from Legon. Ken says, hi, Masterclass. How about you work in an environment where women dress and it's a bit suggestive? You talk about it and you hear, are you the one to tell me how to dress? Why do you keep your eyes roving about? I think you talked about it last week, but let's just touch on it briefly before Sam comes in with the issue on the schools.
Yeah. The point is that the organization and the employer has the duty to ensure that the environment is safe. That includes how people dress. So if it is not an environment that, for example, the beach or the pool side, which allows for some amount of exposure of the body or aspects of the body, then the onus will lie on the employer to make sure that people dress appropriately.
Yeah.
If that does not happen and people get harassed and they can lay claim to it and can prove it, the employer would become responsible for sexual harassment and may be liable to be,
So an act of omission on the part of an employer can also constitute complicity.
Yeah.
Sam, let's talk about schools. Abba mentioned schools. I think I've got Nicholas from Ebrim. Let's talk to Nicholas. Good afternoon, Nicholas. You're welcome to the show.
Thank you. I want to ask this question about this so-called prophets and so on and so on. Female prophets and these reverends and these people who always go in for that. What about that also? And I know of a certain woman who went even in the class, she sits ajar. And what is she telling to the students or the people?
Right. Okay. Please keep listening. We'll try and answer those questions. He's asking about some of the churches and some of the religious leaders who perform certain bathing rituals and otherwise with prayer in other forms, which are in suggestive ways, which may constitute sexual harassment. What about those people? I suppose the question should be, what they are doing is regardless sexual harassment, but what are the systems of redress for situations like that? And then he's also talking about teachers. I think it comes back to the same school system where they sit inappropriately and so expose themselves in ways that may form or cause harassment to their students. So we'll talk about the school. The school keeps going back. Let's talk about the school. Then Senor will come back to you for the harassment with the religious leaders. So Abba talked about it happening in schools. It's also a workplace for teachers, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's just talk a bit about that.
And it's also in an environment that students also become victims, and stories of that nature keeps coming up. I think the last year also there was there was a news item that the school has set up an investigation into sex for grade, kind of thing, that when people refuse to give in to some of these harassment cases, they end up failing their exams and being repeated and all that. So yes, you do not run away from the fact that these are also happening in schools. And much as it's also a lecturer-student relationship, the other side is also reported that in some cases students also harass the lecturers with the possibility of getting grades also in that manner.
But does this happen in lower levels of education? I mean, here you were referring to second tertiary.
Yeah.
But would this also be the case in, let's say, second cycle, even in basic?
Yes, yeah. We've said it, that the environment where any economic activity takes place, you cannot run away from the propensity for harassment to happen. And we also talk about organizations where some workers, or in this case students, are vulnerable in the sense that if I'm in all female school and there are a few lecturers who are male around, most likely you will find that situation happening there in that instance. And so yes, you can't run away from it. Now, what redress are available for addressing these issues is what we were discussing relative to it, that in most cases, people shy away from reporting instances of harassment because of, one, the fear of stigmatization, and also the lack of an environment that guarantees their confidentiality, in a way that makes it comfortable for them to talk about it. Because if this story goes out and it's even proving that it did happen, there are people who are still going to hold you responsible for even daring to report that. So it's all about the grievance handling mechanism, making sure that the opportunities are available for people
to follow through,
to communicate in a manner that makes it very comfortable for the individual victim or the alleged victim, and also for the alleged perpetrator, until it's actually established.
I've got Emilia back on social media. Emilia says, in this case, if the employer is the government of Ghana and the institution is a ministry and there are no clear policies and avenues of reporting, how does an employee take up the matter outside their institution?
I think that Commission for Human Rights and Administrative Justice becomes a first line of action in this instance, because in that case, in that particular workplace, the individual feels that there are no avenues for redress, and if they are unable to pursue, if you like, civil action to protect their interests and all that, I think that the mandate of STRAJ is also to investigate cases of this nature and bring some kind of justice to. But I'm sure that in the ministries you can also go through the civil service or the public service, hierarchy in order to file a complaint. Maybe
but otherwise, I mean, if that's not available.
But you see, the view is also that some organizations think that you cannot be an employee and then take them on in this kinds of external education.
So you'll have to be outside of the institution to do it.
But no, the truth is that the labor law protects anyone who wants to take such action. You can be an employee and still take action against your employer, and your employer is barred from terminating you because you took that action against them. And any termination becomes unfair. So there is that room for an employee to be able to get that redress. The point is, do we have the courage enough to be able to get the redress? That is the question. Because of stigmatization, and because often you become even a target to other employees because they see you as too known or something, people would not want to either report it or go ahead and file official cases against the employer.
But let me ask, in your experience, you guys have done HR for many years. In your experience, some of you have done law and other things. What is the success rate? And I'm not asking for specific numbers or percentages here, but from what you have seen, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is the measure of success for reportage of such cases or should I say, how many such cases have you seen successfully reported and adjudicated? I'm asking that question because now on the back of what we talked about last week about the fact that we are majorly a patriarchal society.
Yeah, and so, ask the question clearly. Is it the reportage or it is the success?
Let's start with the reportage.
The reportage, I'll give it maybe 15%. And that is really, generous.
People coming out to talk about it.
Yes.
People do not 15%. Want to talk
People
about
do
it.
not want to talk about it. But the success rate of adjudicating these matters is at 75-80%. Right. If it truly happened and there's evidence.
Yes. Are there cases where such reports are made and the victims are made to feel like it was a matter ado about nothing? I mean, in your experience, have you come up? Because I suppose that's also one of the fears, that I'm going to go up and talk about it and report it, and it's going to end up saying, what were you doing there in the first place? Stuff like that.
I've seen some HR people who have tried to water down the situation and say, you are a woman, go and handle this thing. It happens to everybody and stuff like that. And that's very dangerous and that's very unprofessional. I don't know if Yao has any such experience.
Not a direct specific experience or an example, but the comments that comes out often when such cases are raised is invariably the reason why people do not, because the burden of proof, is heavier on the victim. Okay, and you ought to be extremely, careful that you have the evidence to support either the harassment or the actual event before you even step forward, because if you go there and you're unable to prove your case, it becomes difficult for you, because everybody then comes back and say, see what you did, you nearly put somebody into trouble. And then it becomes...
Let me just ask this quickly, Sam, and I asked you that same question last week, Senor, that the world over, now there's this whole fight about gender equality, diversity and inclusion and all of that, but that's because history will tell us that society has mainly been a patriarchal society. There are people who don't agree to this argument and they are entitled to their opinion. But as this is to general world society, Ghana has its own peculiarities when it comes to our culture. And there's a culture of, he's an adult, he's a leader of the community, don't talk about it. If it's a woman, we don't get a lot more of those cases, but as for an elderly woman harassing a young man, it happens a lot. But we don't talk about it. Generally, the elder is not who is a perpetrator, is shielded by society. Would that be the reason why we have perhaps low numbers? Senor, you're talking about reportage. Because I know that a lot of people go through, particularly a lot of our young sisters and, friends and all of, they go through a lot of these things, but they don't talk about it. The average female today, if you ask them, has gone through harassment at one point or the other in their lives. But they don't talk about it. They're too embarrassed to even speak about it.
Yeah.
Just, 10 seconds.
But let's correct this. I don't think it's our culture accepts harassment. No.
Not accepts, but does it condone it in any way?
So it does not condone it, except that currently and over time, we don't take drastic action against that. And that is why people don't want to come forward, because after all, when I report it, I just put myself out there.
Okay, this has been exciting. I'm sure you guys, I'm going to have you back in the studio next week, because we're going to continue this discussion. We're also looking to have interviews with some people who may or may not have had situations like that, who are willing to speak to us, so that we can look at case studies and begin to also have a better discussion. And thank you so much, guys, for your time in the studio. Senor, HR Specialist, Labor Consultant, Mr. Kwame Boafo, Head of Human Resources, CalBank. My name is Yabanafo. Up next is the news at 2. Thank you so much for listening. We're back on your radio, same time next week.